Hello, ako si Judas Gavilan. Kayo ay nanonood ng bagong episode ng Newsbreak Beyond the Stories kung saan hihimayin natin ang mga maiinit at mahalagang isyu sa Pilipinas. Sa episode na to, pag-uusapan natin kung ano nga ba ang trabaho ng Commission on Audit at ano ang silbi ng pagsusuring nito sa paggasta ng pera ng mamamayan. Lagi nasa balita ang COA nitong mga nakaraang linggo dahil sa mga nadiskubre nitong anomalya o hindi tamang paggamit ng pondo ng ilang ahensya ng gobyerno, kasama dito ang Department of Health dahil sa pandemya. Tatalakayin natin ang isyong ito kasama si Rapture reporter Lian Buan who covers COA among other many agencies in the Philippines. Hi, Lian.
Hello, Judas. It's my first time na naka-live stream ang Beyond the Stories.
And I think this is the first time na I will talk to you na hindi drug war or hindi anti-terror or justice system ang pag-uusapan natin.
Well, corruption is justice, so it's still related.
So, bago tayo magsimula, I would like to remind our audience na pwede sila magtanong at pwede nilang i-comment yung question nila or kung meron silang opinion about the topic sa comment section ng Facebook, Twitter, or even sa YouTube. At we will try our best to answer these questions as the program progresses. So, thank you, Lian, for joining me today. No? So, for my first question, anong papel na ginagampanan ng COA sa gobyerno? Gaano ba ito ka-importante at saan galing yung mandato nila?
Well, the COA, the Commission on Audit, was created by the 1987 Constitution. Isa siya sa mga constitutional commissions na independent. So it's not under the executive, it's not under the legislative, it's not under the judiciary. It's an independent constitutional commission na for it to be independent, meron din silang fiscal autonomy para hindi sila mahawakan sa leeg ng power of the purse ng legislative. What's their role in government? Their role is to audit. They are auditing 66,000 government offices. So that's around 300 national government agencies and then mga GOCCs and then all LGUs and then all state universities. So tsaka mga water boards and everything. So that's more than 66,000 government offices. At sa ngayon ay meron lang 8,000 na workforce ang COA. So they're kind of spread thinly, but as they said, hindi naman daw na apektuhan ng kanilang performance dahil nga yung kanilang mga controversial annual audit report ang gumimbal sa Administrasyong Duterte. So the role is to audit government and to make sure that these funds are being used prudently, not only just correctly, but prudently and wisely.
You mentioned the annual audit reports na focus ng issue in the past few months or weeks na, diba? Pero gusto ko ng tanungan na, alam ko hindi lang yun yung type ng ginagawa ng COA, marami silang ginagawang audit eh. Can you tell us briefly ano yung mga to? I think except yung annual audit report kasi I'll ask you that later.
All right. Okay, so besides the routinary annual audit report, they can do they're doing an annual financial audit of the GOCCs para mas makita lalo ang financial state ng mga GOCC na to because GOCCs are supposed to earn, diba? They can do a special audit which they did for the pork barrel scam. We all remember that nung nagkaroon ng special audit ng pork barrel scam. And they can also do a fraud audit. So yung naririnig natin na COA doesn't generally make findings of corruption, that's generally correct for the most part, except for when the fraud audit department of the COA sees the need to conduct a fraud audit, in which case, then they will make a finding of corruption. But that's not prosecution, kasi auditors are not prosecutors. So everything... think of COA as like the NBI or the PNP-CIDG. Or the CHR even. Government agencies sila. Meron silang, to some extent, they have that investigative power kasi meron silang kakayahan na mag-inquire. They have that government mandate. But whatever finding they have, it's not a finding of probable cause. So kung ano man yung makita ng COA, it still has to go through the proper prosecutorial channel. And in this case, if it's government funds, it's through the Office of the Ombudsman.
Itong you mentioned na different types of audit report aside from the annual, ano yung threshold nito? Mataas ba para masabi na, I will start this auditing? Ano yung trigger nito? Kailangan ba ng malaking trigger or mabigat na issue? Kasi I remember the past, medyo, ang naalala ko ay high-profile findings. So, I'm curious kung meron na bang dati na hindi naman malaki pero nag-trigger ng ganitong mga types ng reports.
It's walang clear-cut standards for when they would do a special audit or a fraud audit. Tama ka kasi yung mga pinaka-natatandaan nating special audit are very high profile. They did a special audit on pork barrels on PDAF, and then noong 2018 they did one on Malampaya funds. At alalang-alala ko yung Malampaya because it was released in 2017 at medyo malakas yung recommendation nun ng COA. They wanted an investigation and press charges if appropriate against the DBM officials who enabled all of these SAROs to be released and for it to be misused for so many years. Pero wala namang nangyari nun. Kaya I wrote in my article last week, COA is often ignored. Dun sa tanong mo kung may threshold, there was a memorandum of agreement between former Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales and COA Chairman Michael Aguinaldo back in 2017 para sana meron silang trigger amount. In that MOA, it says if related transactions involve a minimum of 100 million, dapat magkikick in na yung mechanism na yung Office of the Ombudsman magsisimula ng imbestiga. But Ombudsman Samuel Martires confirmed that he deactivated that MOA. So walang ganun klaseng trigger amount yung COA ngayon. And dun naman sa fraud audit, it's not clear cut eh. The fraud audit has to, parang kailangan ma-ring mo yung bell niya. Kailangan may mga makita siyang standards. Like, do you want me to discuss yung standards of a fraud audit?
Yeah, go. Every information that we need to know, dapat ilabas mo na ngayon, Lian.
Right. So, merong tinatawag na fraud risk indicators para ma-prompt yung mga fraud auditors na tignan natin to for a possible fraud risk audits. Kailangan nilang silipin kung meron bang weakness in internal controls. So parang lapses in internal control or weaknesses in internal control. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Pag nakikita siguro nila na, this year, so many times violate ng agency na to ang procurement law, or so many times violate ng agency na to this COA regulation or this GPPB regulation. Bakit ganun? Why do they seem to always violate this provision? So dun na mapipeak yung curiosity nila na, why are they so bent on violating this provision? Tapos meron din namang mga obviousness sa mga fraud auditors, yung mga tipong, bakit paulit-ulit na-flag tong transaction na to? And it seems to always be one supplier. So parang, bakit favorite na lang yung supplier na yan? And pwede rin silang tumingin sa network na parang I feel like this contractor is related to this person in the agency, ganon. So it takes a certain kind of expertise and familiarity and paranoia na rin siguro ng mga fraud auditors to say, I'll step in and do a fraud audit. But we were told that sometimes fraud audits are done confidentially in the dun sa start ng audit kasi ayaw rin naman nilang ma-alert yung mga ino-audit nila na iniimbestigahan namin kayo for fraud. So I mean, baka meron ng fraud audit na ginagawa ngayon hindi natin alam.
Mm-hmm. And of course, ang daming parang 2 types pala ng audit yan, ang dami na natin nalaman. So ngayon, Lian, for my next question, gusto po na tayo sa subject ng mga issue ngayon, yung annual audit reports. Dito galing kasi yung mga findings na recently na babalita sa media. Napakadami na ring maling impormasyon na lumalabas tungkol dito dahil parang to counter the narrative that what's happening now. So, Lian, ano nga ba yung importanteng bagay na dapat malaman ng publiko tungkol sa mga annual audit reports? Bakit nga ba may ganitong ginagawa bawat taon?
Okay. So, the AARs are done are published rather at within 6 months of the following fiscal year. So kung 2020 ina-audit, by June 30 of 2021 or the following fiscal year, dapat tapos na ng mga auditors yung AAR, ng resident auditors yung AAR ng ahensya. And they're supposed to be publishing it nitong mga season na to, tong July, August. So we call it the audit season. Why do they have to do this? I mean, I think it's very basic. I mean, it's the right of every Filipino to know how their taxes have been spent. Without COA, we wouldn't know. There is no way that we would know how our taxes are being spent. And that's why it's very bizarre for me to hear from the president to say stop publishing those annual audit reports, because without the annual audit reports, we will be left in total darkness kung paano ginagastos yung pera natin. And at the very least, that is a right to information.
I'll ask you later about the independence of COA, no? But for my next question, can you bring us to the process ng isang annual audit? Ano ba ang titignan dito ng state auditors? I remember, di ba, mention mo kanina sa fraud audits, meron silang mga parang standards or guidelines. Meron din ba ganito sa mga annual auditing?
Wala naman, kasi the AARs are routinary. It's supposed to happen every year. So lahat ng ilalabas na pera or gagastahin na pera ng isang ahensya, or yung hindi nila gagastahin na pera, that is included in the annual audit report. Tapos yun makikita natin, meron na ring performance audit na ginagawa yung mga resident auditors sa AAR. Ito yung mga tinatawag nating value for money. So they're not just looking at, did you spend this correctly or did you spend this wisely? They're also looking at, was it money well spent? Gumastos ka ng ilang milyon, meron ka bang nakitang result ng programa mo? So that's called a performance audit. And that does not necessarily mean malice, kasi nga routine na ginagawa. Ito yung sinasabi nila na procedural lang naman yan, wala namang kaso. And yes, it's procedural, but the findings that are contained in the AARs are not just wala lang. Kasi pag may sinabing unobligated funds, pag sinabing may undocumented transfers, that's not wala lang. Siguro, one has to really get into the habit of reading AARs, kasi may mga AAR na wala talagang findings, wala talaga siyang findings of irregularity. It's just, sometimes may mga agency na ang finding lang, o hindi nyo inaayos yung books nyo. Meron kayong finances na hindi nyo pa natatanggal sa books nyo. Ganun lang, yung mga, your usual accounting flags. Kumbaga, tas minsan nga, marami pang pinupure, yung mga tipong, ang ganda ng paggastos nyo sa gender and development program nyo. Money well spent, ganun. I mean, that's not the verbatim, pero yun.
You mentioned na dapat maging practice ng mga tao magbasa ng mga AAR findings, no? Can you tell us, I wanted to ask you kung ano yung mga dapat findings, pero sabi mo nga, ang daming pwedeng i-point out ng COA. So gusto ko na tanongin Lian, ano yung usually na pag nabasa mo to ay red flag to, o delicts to, problematic to, or dapat itong parang i-discuss pa further in the public para mabigyan ng atensyon ng mga tao?
Ito yung favorite, ito yung phrase na rings my bells. Once na sinabi na nilang, the propriety, validity, regularity, or even legality of this transaction cannot be ascertained. Yun yung phrase na talagang, okay, susulat ko na to. Pwede ring making this transaction doubtful. Yun, isusulat ko na rin yun. And the less often or less recurring, kasi yung mga cannot be ascertained, sobrang recurring yan. Yung mga less frequent, yung mga spurious receipts, spurious vouchers, fabricated receipts, fake vouchers, ayun, ano na yun, parang that is downright red flag, kasi may nameke na ng resibo, and we saw that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to correct myself later, I think in 2018, pero sure akong Philippine Coast Guard yun, yung mga nakitaan ng mga fabricated receipts. And we know what a fabricated receipt can be in a larger scheme of things. It's pork barrel scam, it's fertilizer fund scam, it's malampaya fund scam. So dun nagsisimula lagi, diba, yung mga ghost purchases, tapos pina-fabricate lang yung mga receipts. So yun yung lesser frequent. The medyo more frequent yung mga the propriety cannot be ascertained kasi nga kulang ng dokumento. And then mas frequent yung mga unobligated and unutilized funds.
In layman's term, ano yung cannot be ascertained? Parang malabo or hindi namin
ma-sure. Hindi namin ma-sure. Kumbaga, parang at the end of the day, if the agency can submit all the documents, siguro after 2 years, masubmit nila yung mga dokumento at mapatanayan naman na lang, it was a valid transaction. So be it. But at this point, the agencies know that they're being audited every year. The agencies know they have a deadline. They have an exit conference, yet they cannot submit all documents. So the auditors are saying, hindi namin masusure kung tama yung ginawa mo. At dito 'di ba dito nag-aaway na parang bakit hindi niyo binigyan ng due process ang ang agency. They are given due process kasi I'll have to go back to your question kanina. Binibigyan muna sila ng confidential AOM, that's the Audit Observation Memorandum. Na i-AOM ko yung transaction, ito yung nakita ko mali, sabi ng auditor. And then the agency would have time to answer that. Tapos, we were told that kapag sinagot ng agency yung AOM and the auditor is satisfied, hindi niya na yun i-include sa AAR. So, kung sumagot ka lang ng maayos at ipakita mo ng maayos yung mga dokumento mo, there wouldn't be any flags in the AAR.
So, parang kasi ang dami nagkasabi na dapat to kinausap mo ng ahensya, dapat in-involve mo na sila. Pero so mali.
There is an exit conference.
Yeah. So parang aside from that, or can you remind us ulit yung ano bang part ng auditing process na naka-loop in na yung government agencies? Like, looping ba sila all parts of the process or may part lang na siguro sa beginning or the end?
Okay, for starters, the auditors are inside the agencies. They are resident auditors. So, ito yung mga nakakasama nila sa pantry, nakakasama nila sa CR. Hindi natin alam kung ini-invite sila sa outing, pero kasama nila to, tropa nila tong mga auditors. So, they know. And they know the mandate that they are being audited every time. At sinasabi nga, time and time again ng COA, if you are unsure of what you're about to do, if you're unsure of how to spend, punta ka lang sa COA office ng ahensya mo at tanungin at sumangguni sa mga auditor na, tama ba itong gagawin ko? Para dun pa lang, meron ka ng, okay, sinabi ng auditor, tama daw yun. So, meron kang ganun. But for your question, so, once an AOM is issued, looped in na doon yung agency kasi inisyuhan ka na ng AOM so pwede kang sumagot. But for the more formal process, the auditing, the more formal and rigid process of auditing begins mga February the following fiscal year. So kung 2020 ino-audit, February sila nagsimula. So February, March, April, May, June, 5 months or actually parang aabot yan ng 6 na the auditing, the formal auditing process has started. And within those 6 months, sobrang daming meeting nun kasi hindi naman makakabuo ang mga auditors ng AAR nang hindi sila nakakapag-usap. And again, if you get into the habit of reading an AAR, you would see that management comments are always included.
Yeah, I remember when I'm writing COA stories pag weekends, pag wala si Lian, lagi ko nakikita yung hinahanap nga lagi yung side ng government agencies kasi most likely kung sumagot na sila ng ayos andun.
Unless kung wala doon, ibig sabihin hindi talaga sila sumagot, which is kaninong fault kung hindi kayo sumagot.
And we all know that too well, yung mga hindi sumasagot sa atin pagka
yes,
pag i-release mo yung story.
Sumagot. Bakit kaya? Gano'n.
Yeah. So, Lian, meron tayong tanong from our audience. I'm medyo nag-advance na ako dito, pero let's see kung kaya natin sagutin to, no? Sabi ni Tenga Livio from Facebook, is it right to declare the budget for 2022 while COA is still in time, parang dinidisclose pa nila yung deficiencies ng government agencies? Dapat
Wala tayong choice kasi kung hindi tayo mag-e-enact ng GAA, wala tayong pera next year. And we know that, di ba nag-re-enacted budget tayo? Hindi ko na matandaan kung anong year. Yung nagkagulo ang House and Senate, di ba nag-re-enacted budget tayo? I think 2019. At nagkagulo kasi hindi ma-implement yung mga salary standardization ng gobyerno. So we don't have a choice. We really have to enact a GAA, lalo na pandemic. I guess it's paramount na lang for the investigators, whether it's the Congress or the Office of the Ombudsman, to make sure that these audits amount to something.
Yeah. Yan, nag-umpisa ka na sa next question ko kasi doon na tayo sa post report na. So now, we know now the findings of the report. For example, sa isang government, maraming anomalyang. What happens now? What can COA do? Ano yung power nila? Meron ba silang power to file charges or recommend charges? Basically, ano yung kaya nilang gawin sa findings nila?
It's the COA's I don't know how to put it delicately, no? Pero COA's power is as powerful as you and me. Kasi pwede akong pumunta sa Office of the Ombudsman para mag-file ng complaint without anything, diba? Pero what the audits do is they're giving you some sort of a very good backup. Kasi if you draft a complaint and file it before the office of the ombudsman, and your evidence and your basis is just your own findings. I mean, sige, meron kang dokumento na nakita, ganyan-ganyan, blah, 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 blah. Compare mo yan kung ang ebidensya mo ay isang audit report na inaudit ng gobyerno, ng isang ahensya ng gobyerno, made by experts, expert auditors, expert accountants, went through due process. Anong mas may bearing? Siyempre yung may audit report. Kaya paulit-ulit kong sinasabi sa mga article ko na the Office of the Ombudsman and the DOJ, kasi sila yung itinalagang mega task force on corruption, have a motu proprio power. Kahit walang lumapit sa kanilang citizen na mag-file ng complaint, they can do it on their own, and they have done so in the past without the benefit of an audit report. Ngayon, meron ng audit report. So parang mas pinalakas pa. Naalala ko dati, we wrote about the COA findings on the deal between DOT under Wanda Teo and her brother Ben Tulfo, yung Bitag, yung travel show sa PTV. Kung natatandaan yun, sobrang ano din nun, it was a very sensational audit. Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales, motu proprio, opened a fact-finding inquiry into that. We don't know kung ano na yung nangyari doon, pero she did so because meron ng audit report. And in the past nga, kahit walang audit report, kaya nilang mag-motu proprio just because it's an issue of public interest, ganon. So, in that, parang, I rarely hear COA filing the complaint themselves. Pero in fairness kasi to COA, nagawa na kasi nila yung trabaho nila, nandiyan yung audit report nila, and it's for the proper investigators to take it somewhere else.
What I'm getting from you is sobrang importante ng Office of the Ombudsman
Yes.
in this chain ng anti-corruption drive ng COA, no? So, with all that context natin ngayon, kung saan tayo ngayon, yung mga findings. Lian, face on your, matagal mo na rin nagko-cover ng ombudsman. Ilang ombudsman
Hindi naman ganun katagal, grabe ka.
Ilang ombudsman na rin daanan mo, basically, di ba?
Hoy, dalawa pa lang. Dalawa
pa lang pala. Pero yun, what should the ombudsman do this time? Kung we live in a perfect world na maayos yung justice system, gumagalaw yung mga ahensya, ano yung dapat gawin nila once lumabas yung findings ng audit?
Not in general kasi hindi naman lahat ng audit ay worthy of an inquiry. Pero itong DOH audit, we're operating under the context of the pandemic. Ang laki nung na-flag na amount, it's 67 billion. 41 billion of that is procurement lang sa PSDBM na sinasabi nga na yung PSDBM nag-procure ng mga sobrang mamahal na face shield and face mask, walang authorization. And remember that the Bayanihan Law allowed agencies to resort to negotiated procurement. So yun sanang protection natin na public bidding, wala na yun kasi pinayagan ng mga ahensya na wag na kayo magpabid, matatagilan lang kayo, mag-negotiated procurement na kayo. So very yung risk exposure ng environment, mataas yung exposure niya to corruption. So in a perfect world, the 2017 MOA between COA and Ombudsman should have kicked in already. Kasi ang laki 67 billion, at nakwento sa akin ni Commissioner Heidi Mendoza na nung pumutok yung issue about Major General Carlos Garcia. Ang ginawa ni Ombudsman Simeon Marcelo, na hindi ko naabutan, ay lumapit siya sa COA. Sabi niya, gawa na tayo ng joint committee. So, auditors are taking care of the vouchers. Sila yung mga accountant, sila yung mga auditor. Prosecutors, hand in hand, are working with them kasi hindi nga lahat ng auditing lapses amount to a criminal offense. Sa dinami-dami ng na-dismiss na kaso ng Sandigan Bayan, we know that all too well. So, the purpose or the benefit of an auditor and a prosecutor working together is making sure that yung mga voucher na nakukuha na ebidensya ng mga auditor, merong prosecution lens. Merong prosecutor na magsasabi na, okay, that's what I need to prove that RA 3019 or graft was violated. That is what I need to prove that technical malversation was committed. So that is the value of having an auditor and prosecutor work together, and that is the vision of President Duterte's mega task force on corruption. Kaya nga magmumowa si Justice Secretary Guevara among DOJ, COA, and Ombudsman to put not only a resident auditor in every agency, maglalagay din sila ng resident prosecutor in every agency. Now, my question is, nasa na yung MOA na yan? Last year pa yung mega task force. Galit na ba ako? Nasa na yung MOA na yan? Last year pa yung mega task force on corruption and they did di ba sobrang ano nila, they were so hell-bent on investigating PhilHealth. That was motu proprio and pinag-imbestiga ang NBI. In a very quick time, the NBI was able to make a conclusion and submit a complaint to the Office of the Ombudsman. The question is, why aren't they doing it now for the DOH? What is so special about Health Secretary Francisco Duque or the DOH that the President himself is saying from Malacanang that I will stand with Duque even if it will bring me down?
Na-all siya. Pero, yan, reminded me of the mega task force corruption ng DOJ.
Yeah.
If the audience wants to know more about that, we have a podcast episode on that I think tagal na nun, last year or early this year.
Hindi ko na matanda. Basta alam ko ang tagal ng mega task force on corruption.
Just one of the many task force ng DOJ.
Yes.
Pero Lian, are we hearing anything from the Ombudsman regarding these issues?
The Ombudsman Samuel Martires has issued 2 statements, both of which stand by his position that he would rather wait for the auditing process to be final.
And
can I expound on that? Sorry.
Yeah,
Isa yun kasi sa laging pinag-uusapan eh. Kailan ba nagiging final ang COA process? For sure, the annual audit report is final na in a sense that it has already gone through the reglementary 6-month auditing period na alam ng mga ahensyang mangyayari. So, ano ba yung sinasabi ni Ombudsman Martires na final? So, when the auditors transmit the AAR to the agencies, they give them 60 days to report back to the auditors kung na-comply na yung mga recommendation. Kasi pag nagbasa ka ng AAR, may mga recommendation doon. And usually these are, we recommend that management submits to us documents to prove that it was authorized, ganyan. We recommend that they direct the disbursing officers to submit receipts, ganon, puro recommendation. So in 60 days, yung laging sinasabi ni Duque na 60 days and ni Congressman Marcoleta, it's a post-audit thing. So in 60 days, the DOH should go back to the COA and say, okay, ito na yung mga kinumply naming recommendation nyo. So if the auditor is satisfied, then well and good. Good for you. Good for the government. Good for us. Kung hindi, pag hindi talaga satisfied ang auditor, pwede siyang mag-result in a notice of disallowance. Ito yung ibalik mo sa kaban ng bayan yung ginastos mong ilang milyon para dyan because it's really not allowed. So, it's a notice of disallowance. But the thing with the notice of disallowance is, kaya po siyang i-appeal mo pa siya sa Commission on Audit Proper, sa unbank ng COA, pwede mo pa siyang i-appeal sa korte kung ayaw mo talagang magbayad, kung hindi ka talaga naniniwalang disallowed yung transaction mo. Tapos minsan, wala naman nagre-resulta in a notice of disallowance. And when you read an AAR, meron, folder kasi yun ng mga 10 atang dokumento. There's a document there called the status of past years recommendation. At pag nagbasa ka, ang daming mga recommendation na ilang taon na hindi pa nako-comply. So parang, doon din nanggagaling yung frustration ng mga auditor na kahit naman mag-recommend kami, parang inaalikabok lang yung mga report namin, ganyan. So, when people say that wait for the COA process to finalize, the question is when? Kailan pa yan mafa-finalize? That's why Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales said, I interviewed her the last week ata, sabi niya na parang, if you wait for that, you're gonna wait forever.
So, parang pwede lang mag-delay tactics. Basically, wala na bang
ignore. You can just ignore it.
Wala bang implications or pwede silang pagalitan or what kung hindi nila kung ano documents yung hinihingi para ma-prove or ma-counter yung findings ng COA. Pag hindi nila pinasa yon within a 60-day period, meron bang malaking implications or wala naman?
In a strict COA world, the auditor can issue a notice of disallowance. At malaking bagay 'yun kasi dinisallow mo yung transaction at kailangan mong ibalik yung pera. I mean, kung nagastos mo na yung pera, saan mo kukunin yung ibabalik mo, 'di ba? But in a larger scheme of things, nawawala na yung dito papasok yung, okay, Ombudsman, sana may gawin ka. Okay, DOJ, sana may gawin ka. And in the most abstract of things, that's why COA is publishing yung AAR for transparency para at the very least, worst comes to worst, walang mangyari, at least alam ng taong bayan kung ano yung nangyari. And sa mga nanonood, nasa sa inyo na yun, what you want to do with that information. Pero, di ba, masakit tanggapin yun kasi parang, are we gonna settle for just transparency? Kaya sabi kanina ni Senator Grace Poe, kung walang masasampulan, paulit-ulit na lang tong problemang to.
Applies to many things in the government. I remember pag may mga stories tayo on notice of disallowances, lagi siyang nasa LGU level or individual level, parang hardly ako nakakita ng government agency level. Baka nga dahil doon sinabi mo na hindi nagre-reply. Pero yan, so, I know, Ombudsman, malaki yung part. What can make or break itong process na to? Lahat ba talaga nasa kamay talaga ng Ombudsman at this point? Like, political will? Or...
In the legal sense, yes, the Ombudsman has a lot of power and DOJ has a lot of power kasi sila yung prosecutor. So, in the legal sense, yes, sila yung may kapangyarihan. Pero alam naman natin how our political world works. So, mas mataas yung value ng ginagawa ng House of Representatives and the Senate ngayon. Kasi kung sila yung kung sila yung willing lang at this point to investigate, at least they're gonna unearth or discover more information that we didn't know yet, and maybe that will compel someone to do something. And diba, actually anyone can file a complaint nga. I mean, if you want to complain, get a lawyer and draft your complaint based on the audit report. Mahihirapan ka nga lang kasi ang isa-cite mo audit report and yung transcript ng Senate. At sasabihin sa'yo ng mga prosecutor, wala ka namang personal knowledge dyan, hearsay ka lang, puro ganun. That's why, mas maganda kung nanggaling yung complaint sa fact-finding ng isang prosecutorial body like the Ombudsman and the DOJ because hindi na lang yun hearsay kasi nakita na nila, the documents are there.
I've been wanting to ask you these questions ever since pumutok yung balita na to. What's keeping DOJ from acting? Given na sila. Wala pa sila statement regarding dito.
Sabi ng Secretary Guevara, it's the same as sa Ombudsman Martires that they would rather wait for the COA process to finalize. But again, until when? Kasi if you're gonna wait for the COA process to finalize, it's really gonna take forever. Kunwari yung overstocking ng medicines and expiring medicines, just paulit-ulit na lang yan. Sobrang every year you would see that finding, not sa DOH. I mean, has it been solved? Obviously not. Kasi meron na namang finding na ganun. At sinabi nga ni Senator Ping Lacson kanina, bakit ba may overstock? Meron bang mafia sa loob ng DOH? At bakit hindi nyo ma-stop yung problemang yan? At sinabi rin niya namang auditor na nakausap ko every time daw recurring ang overstocking, ang isang nila dyan, ang isang parang probability dyan, my favorite ka sigurong supplier na gusto mong laging bigyan ng kontrata. Kaya kahit hindi mo na kailangan yung supply or yung stock, bibili ka and it results in overstocking. And again, going back, parang COA is always often ignored except for extraordinary circumstances like pork barrel and fertilizer fund scam. And kung walang gagalaw, wala talagang nangyayari.
You have your story, you're in the often ignored COA audits, something. Ano yung title ulit yan?
Often ignored COA fuels pandemic outrage against the Duterte government.
I wanted to ask you, bakit ba often ignored?
Kasi babalik ako dun sa explanation na kasi hindi sila prosecutors they don't have the prosecutorial power and ayun, ang sad na lagi silang in-ignore. I guess that speaks of our values. as a nation. I mean, ilang beses na rin naman tayong ninakawan, diba? Ilang beses na rin naman tayong niloko. So, ganun. And babalik ako dun sa Malampaya Fund scam. Grabe, when I read that report in 2017, I was so aghast dun sa kasi it's a scam from way back 2011 or 2001, no, not 2011. It's a scam from way back 2001. 'Di ba? Ito nga yung ikinamatay ni Doc Jerry Ortega when he was exposing that Palawan funds were being misused, and yet we're in 2021 na. Imagine special audit na yun ng COA. So, wala rin naman nangyari.
So, yan, parang from our conversation, clear-cut naman na parang na-counter na lahat ng mga gustong messaging ng government na una sabihin mo lang due process, pero may process naman talaga dahil involved sila sa parang maraming parts na involved sila na binigyan sila ng tamang oras para mag-answer sa findings. And pangalawa, yung may mga lumabas sa hearings na nasagot naman ng COA. Pero bakit ganito yung presidente? Bakit outright inaaway niya yung COA, outright sinasabihan niya na huwag niyo publicize? Marami na rin Health Secretary mismo sinasabi niya, winarak niyo kami. Hindi na kayo naawa sa amin or wala ganang may crisis. Bakit ganito yung response nila sa COA when in fact, every year naman ginagawa to, and in the past, nagkaroon na ng mga audits na kahit beyond this administration, may mga high-profile audit findings na naisalabas, na inatake na yung mga tao, it cost some people their election, even their retirement benefits dahil nag-convict sila. Bakit ganito, in this administration, in this context, ganito yung reaction ng administrasyon?
I mean, I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, President Duterte, at least is being transparent. Hindi naman bago yung pagtingin niya sa COA. If we remember data, sinabi niya, push them down the stairs, kidnap them, torture them. So, actually, mild pa nga yung sinabi niyang ignore COA. And ang mahirap niyan is when he says, don't publish the AARs. Kasi, shocks, anong mangyayari pag sinabi niya and actually the COA is really compelled to not publish the AARs? That's gonna be a massive blow to freedom of information and transparency. So, medyo doon ako kinakabahan kasi yung push them down the stairs, kidnap and torture them, well, it's bad. But, I mean, you can say what you want, parang ganun. Pero, natatakot ako sa posibilidad na pag inulit-ulit ng presidente at pag merong inside negotiations na wag na kayong mag-publish, ganun. Nakakatakot yun kasi baka COA is really driven not to publish kasi there's no explicit text in the Constitution that says they should publish. Actually, nasa GAA siya, nasa GAA siya na they should publish pero pwedeng tanggalin sa GAA next time. I mean, I don't know the whole constitutional implication and the whole constitutional basis of it. Pero nakakatakot kapag COA is driven not to publish those reports. At balikan ko lang, hindi naman, it's not new to the Duterte presidency. Naalala mo nga kay Noynoy dati, post-Yolanda, ang dami ring adverse findings ng COA na nabubulok yung mga food packs ng DSWD dati, diba? Kaya nga nagkaroon ng one of the campaign narratives against Mar Rojas in 2016 is where are the Yolanda funds, ganon. And that those all came from audits, yung mga nabulok, yung mga food packs from foreign donors nung Yolanda. Ganon. So it's not new. The Duterte government is not special. Well, they just have the unfortunate they just really have the misfortune of being the one who has to manage the pandemic, but that does not excuse them.
Yeah. May next question, Ian. Ano pa iba nakikita mo na posibleng takot ka mangyari if continue na inaatake at pinipressure ang COA at this point, aside from parang ceasing publishing the COA reports?
Well, you could say na baka i-water down or mag-hold back yung mga resident auditors from doing their jobs. Pero like all of the people I've talked to so far, describe talaga auditors as matatapang talaga at as in hindi talaga sila nagpapatalo, ganun. I mean, these are very professional auditors and accountants and they really take their mandate to heart. Kaya I mean, you can say that na baka it will get to them, na baka mag-hold back sila, they rein in themselves, but so far everyone I've talked to are saying hindi yan gagawin ng mga auditors.
And for the next question, Ian, in the context that we're in, pandemya, maraming perang ginagastos dahil ngayong pandemya, bakit importante na independent ang COA? Bakit importante ngayon nga na hindi mag-coerce sa pressure yung mga auditors natin? In the context that we're in now.
Because it's a lot of money. And again, ibabalik ko dun sa sinuspend ang public bidding. Diba? The public bidding is supposed to be our main protector against corruption kasi rigid ang public bidding eh. As in, sobrang daming rules ng public bidding. And we understand that under a context of a pandemic, you have to really expedite purchases. Kaya sa bayanihan law, binigyan ng green light yung mga agency na huwag ka na magpa-public bidding, mag-negotiated procurement ka na. And to some extent, naniniwala naman tayo na kailangan yon kasi parang urgent talaga eh. It's a matter of life and death. Every second, every minute may namamatay. So, yeah, we get it. We get it na kailangang i-waive ang public bidding. But also, pag winave ang public bidding, tumataas yung exposure to corruption and ang daming pera nito. So, not only do we have to watch where our money goes, we are operating in a context where people are dying due to misuse of, people may potentially die due to misuse of money. So it's no longer just this very abstract concept of funds or protecting yung kaban ng bayan. Ito very malapit sa sikmura ng tao na kapag merong na-misuse na pera, baka it's equivalent to a ventilator that was not available to this person. Ganon. So, and the auditor said that sa AAR nila na it could have saved so many lives if these opportunities were not missed by the DOH.
Yeah. And for my last question, Miss Lian, for our audience na we're watching right now, no? And sabi mo nga kanina na dapat bantayan yung mga nangyayari. Ano yung mga dapat abangan nila or bantayan in the coming months na parang dapat i-monitor nila or pag nangyari to, delikado, kailangan i-follow through or what?
Number one is they have to really monitor yung investigations into the PSDBM. Kasi it's a very, paano ba? How do I explain it? The PSDBM procured face shields for 120 pesos per piece and face masks for as high as, I think, 37 if I'm not mistaken, or 27. Kokorek ko na yung sarili ko mamaya.
Yeah.
Pero mahal. Bumili sila ng ganun kamahal and hindi nila mabenta yon sa mga client agencies nila. So sa face shields pa lang, merong more than 400,000 na nakatenga lang sa mga bodega at hindi nagagamit, and it's costing government 60 million in revenues. Add to that the face mask na pwedeng mag-expire. The government is missing out on 95 million pesos in revenues kasi hindi nila mabenta yung mga face mask and face shields na binila nila sa napakamamahal na presyo. And kanina sa Senate, sinabi na yung fund transfer ng DOH ng 41 billion pesos to the PSDBM, bakit walang MOA and bakit pinayagan yung PSDBM na mag-procure hindi naman common use supplies ang face shield? It's supposed to be the DOH that has the expertise to buy that kind of item. So kailangan nilang kailangan nilang bantayan yun kasi for a year, more than a year, required tayong mag-face shields. Tapos meron palang 400,000 face shields na nakatagay lang sa mga bodega ng BBMPS. So that's supposed to kailangan, dapat interesado ka kasi hindi mo lang tax yung pinambili dun sa mga face shield na yon. It affects your life kasi ikaw yung required na gumamit ng face shield. And next, outside of DOH, we're seeing billions infused into the budget of the NTF-ELCAC na nakita nga natin, sinulat natin nung nakaraan na merong milyon na pinunta through TESDA, and TESDA is saying, kasi kami yung head ng poverty reduction cluster ng NTF-ELCAC, so we're using that fund for the livelihood programs ng mga rebel returnees para sila, na parang, bakit kayo yung nagfa-facilitate niyan? Sinabi na nga ng COA na actually, yung scholarship funds nyo, yung rule to use scholarship funds of TESDA already caters to a wide variety of clients. So you didn't have to course it through the NTF-ELCAC. Kung gusto nyong tumulong ng rebel returnee, you can do it as TESDA. You can do it within the strict definition of TESDA scholarship fund. So COA is asking, why course it through the NTF-ELCAC? So the NTF-ELCAC is a very interesting budget to see unfold. Lalo na inamin naman na ng COA data na mahirap siyang i-track kasi baka most of that, malami dun sa budget na yon will be used as a confidential and intelligence fund item. So pag intel na yon, hindi mo na yun mo-audit.
Yeah. Sobrang dami ko natutunan kay Lian ngayon, beyond their stories, beyond your Rappler recap kagabi. If di nyo pa napapanood yun, panoorin nyo sa Facebook page ng Rappler, yung Rappler recap ni Lian on PSTBM and DOH.
Sa Friday, ang continue, actually bukas, meron sa House of Representatives, and then 1:30 p.m. sa Friday sa Senate naman.
Yes. And bago kong tapusin yung episode na to, binabasa ko yung mga comments ng ating mga audience. Marami sa kanila ay galit nga sa nangyayari. Marami mga strong sentiments.
Nagalit na rin kasi ang taas din ng pitch ko eh.
Na-carried away sila. Pero I would like to tell our audience na if gusto nilang ipatuloy yung discussion na to, pwede sila sumali sa isang Facebook page, a Facebook group ng Rappler kung saan pinag-uusapan natin ng mga different issues in the country na nangyayari ngayon sa ilalim ni Presidente Duterte. Ang pangalan ng group na to ay ang Rappler Room. Makita nyo sa comment section or sa screen yung link nito, punta lang kayo doon para sumali. Pero meron din tayong election-specific na room, yung PH Vote Room naman. Lihan, i-mention ko na ito, natawa ako kasi merong isang nagbasa ng sabi ni Nonoy Olores, maganda yung book sa likod na Justice by Michael Sandel. So, nakita nila yung libro mo sa likod.
Maganda nga, tama. I recommend.
Yun. And, ayun. Thank you, Lian, for joining me today and for explaining to us yung mga nangyayari ngayon, yung mga bawat sulok na COA na dapat alam ko technical masyado minsan, pero kailangan malaman talaga ng tao kasi pera natin to, taxpayers to ng bayan. At ultimately, itong mga pera na to na maling spending, misspending, ang affected dito ay mga projects na dapat tayo nakikinabang.
At buhay.
Yeah. The pandemic, yes. And for our viewers, thank you for watching. Para sa isa pang malalim na discussion tungkol sa COA, auditing at government spending ngayong pandemic, panoorin nyo yung Newsbreak Chats bukas Thursday, August 26 at 4 p.m. Andun na si Lian Buwan. Guest din siya doon. 4 p.m. bukas yun.
Magkasawa kayo sa high-pitched tone ko.
Yes. And meron din tayo isang Rappler Plus. If you want to support fearless and independent journalism, pwede kang mag-visit sa link na nakita nyo sa comment section o sa screen ngayon. It's rappler.com/supportrappler. It's Rappler Plus. Pwede kayong sumali at makakuha ng mga exclusive content mula sa mga Rappler reporters and editors about the many issues that plague our country right now. So, kung gusto nyo sundan ng issue na to naman ng COA, huwag kalimutan na palaging bisitahin ang Rappler website. Pwede rin kayong, kung hindi nyo pa nilalike ang Facebook ng Rappler, ilike nyo na pati Newsbreak. At i-follow nyo rin kami sa Twitter at pati na rin sa, wala tayong TikTok siguro, wala tayong TikTok sa Twitter and sa Instagram. Follow nyo kami doon lahat.
Samahan and listen to Law of Duterte Land podcast.
Law of Duterte Land podcast ay makita nyo sa Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcast, sa lahat
everywhere you get your
everywhere. Podcast. Yes. Ano yung last episode mo doon, Lian? Latest episode mo?
Oh gosh, hindi ko naman. Don't remind me that I need a new episode.
Yes, pero yun, kung if you want to know more about the justice system in the Philippines, the legal field in the Philippines under Duterte, listen to Law of Duterte Land, hosted by Lian Buwan, our guest right now. Samahan niyo ulit kami next week para sa bagong episode ng show na to. We don't know kung ano yung topic kasi ang dami nangyayari sa bansa natin. Pero watch out na lang in the coming days. So ako ulit si Judes Gavilan and this is Newsbreak Beyond the Stories.
Thanks, Judes.